Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Rise. I'm Bridget Howard, and joining me today is a very special person, my former boss, mentor, and dear friend, Jesse Kurtz. Jess, so glad you could join us today.
No, I appreciate the invitation. I don't think that you'll quite understand until years from now what you're doing for aspiring broadcasters that are looking for their first job or their next job. The collection of people and opinions and thoughts and experiences that you have all kind of compiled into one spot that people can consume and learn from. You're doing a great service. I'm proud of you, and I'm humbled to even be in the conversation with some of these people that you have put together.
Well, my hope for today's episode is to shed some light on your perspective being an employer in the hiring process, your advice from your journey itself, and then, just advice for young broadcasters about questions that they probably want to ask people like you, but they don't have the time or don't have the opportunity to ask. So we're going to start off with your journey and where that began, which was Colorado State. So what kind of opportunities did you have there that really kickstarted your journey in broadcasting?
I'm very fortunate to have gone to Colorado State in that there are many places across America when it comes to colleges that are near the top of journalism schools, broadcast schools, the Syracuse, the Missouris, the Northwesterns. I put Colorado State right up there. It's kind of a dark horse in that conversation because they have unbelievable teachings, and the experiences that we had as kids, as 18, 19-year-old kids coming up through this business was second to none. I kind of fell into CTV. It was campus television. It was a local cable access that on a whim, I saw an advertisement in the student newspaper. They were looking for sportscasters, and knowing this is what I wanted to do since I was like 4 years old, I said, why not? So I show up, and next thing you know, I was hired for a weekly magazine show called Sports Fest, where I ended up traveling with the football team, doing weekly reports. Our weekly 30-minute show had packages that we did with the football team, whether home or on the road, interviews, highlights. So I kind of cut my teeth there. And then, the journalism school brought in professors that taught writing. I actually learned how to write from the guy who wrote the book on writing, Fred Shook. And it was an unbelievable experience. And the folks at Colorado State really put me on this path. I'm forever grateful to Greg Luft and those folks on campus that put me on this path to where I am today and living my dream.
How important would you say it is, and was it for you in your journey to get that experience of kind of the all-encompassing journalist, right? So like the writing, the video aspect, the reporting aspect, because once you get out of college, they expect you to know how to do all those things.
Yeah, it set me up for success that they expected all of us to graduate knowing how to write, knowing how to edit, knowing how to shoot, and not only knowing how to, embracing that. Many folks can do it all. Do they enjoy it? Do they enjoy that grind? And I did enjoy it because of the way they taught those things. And when I got into the real world, I interned for 3 years at CBS 4 in Denver on the assignment desk and then as an associate producer. But then I got into an internship at KCAU Channel 9 in Sioux City, where for a summer I went out there. And because of my experience, not only on campus shooting, writing, and editing on a weekly basis, and then working at a TV station in Denver, they put me on air. I was working for free, but I was doing nightly packages that were aired in Sioux City, got to do live shots. And that really put me in a position to get my first professional job. But I wouldn't have had that experience if I wasn't held accountable in college at Colorado State, learning how to write and craft a good story, learning how to shoot a great story, and learning how to present a great story.
Well, your first job out of college, you get a job to be a sports anchor and reporter for the local ABC affiliate in Sioux City. So based on your experience, what suggestions do you have for listeners who are about to graduate and are considering going that local news route? Because it is a grind and there's a lot you have to prepare yourself for.
Expect a thankless job. And I'm grateful that I have that experience. It is fast paced. It's high stress. You make a lot of mistakes and you can look silly. But working under tight deadlines like that have helped me in many things professionally and personally. Local news is not for everybody, but you do need to understand that there's a level of stress that you will have felt that maybe you haven't felt before, and be ready for that. And be ready for, we all grew up in this business wanting to work NFL games, work the World Series. Most of my time was spent shooting a high school girls basketball game or a track and field event, going to a wrestling event, a high school wrestling event. Those sorts of things and those reps are super, super important, that you learn those things at a much slower tempo. So when you get thrown into the fire, when it's quote unquote big time, or so we think at the time, that you're ready for it. So be ready for a lot of sports that maybe you didn't quite think there, or a level of sports that you didn't quite have planned, but be ready for a grind and stress, and learn how to handle those stresses and that grind, and the rest kind of starts taking care of itself.
Well, you mentioned it. Local news isn't for everyone. So for people who are interested in broadcasting, they know they don't want to go the local news route. What would your advice be to them when they're looking for jobs, but are still looking to get those on-air reps and continuous reps that you do get in local news?
Yeah, one of the things that broadcasters right now, or aspiring broadcasters coming out of high school or out of college, have, the advantage they have over those who came through schools way back in the 1990s, like I did, is they've been content creators all their life. Like, they grew up with cell phones, and you guys and folks that are in high school and college right now are creating content on a daily basis, growing up with Instagram and Facebook Live and Instagram Live and Twitch and all these things. Become a content creator like you're doing right here. Become inquisitive about things, ask questions, capture that, create videos. Once you start creating content, you become a storyteller. You may not know it, but any sort of video that you create, you're telling a story. There's probably a beginning, a middle, an end, some sort of a climax, a high moment, a surprise in the video that inherently is a story. So it may cost a little money up front. Getting a camera, a DSLR, those are great now. Didn't have those when I was coming up. A microphone, create a podcast, be talking to folks. The more you can do that, get the Adobe Creative Cloud where you can start toying with things. The more you create, the more you put out there, the more exposure that you're going to get, if you're not going to get the nightly exposure and the nightly reps on a local news channel. Because you're right, it's not for everybody. But if you're going to be in this business as a storyteller, you have to start telling stories somewhere. So start telling them for yourself. Start telling them for your parents. Hey, watch this. The more reps you get, the better you get, the more exposure you get. And then all of a sudden, someone's going to see your stuff and say, that's our person.
Well, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There's no reason in this day and age that you can't be a content creator. There's no, like, when you go to apply for jobs, and give this COVID last 2020 year as a perfect example. It's like, if you go to apply for a job once things start opening up again and they ask you what you've done and you're like, oh, well, there weren't any jobs, like I didn't do anything. They're going to be like, really? Like, there's so many ways that you can figure out how to do things nowadays. So there's really just no reason that you can't do it.
There's a story on every street corner in America. Now, you may not be telling the story for a local news or for a network TV or for a newspaper, but you can go capture the story, tell the story, and post the story. YouTube is a magical thing. You have a place that you can broadcast your own work. It happens every day. As one of my favorite reporters and a guy that I looked up to a lot and kind of examined and watched his work to try to craft mine is Steve Hartman of CBS. He used to have a segment called Everybody Has a Story. And everybody does have a story. And every street corner in America has a story. If you keep your eyes and ears open, and you have the guts to go and approach that persons, or that moment and capture the story and then tell that story, you'll be well on your way. This business takes guts. You have to kind of put yourself out there. You can't be shy. So just keep your eyes and ears open. Have the equipment that you need, the base equipment to capture those moments, and become a storyteller. Refine those, put it on your own website, on YouTube, and people then start to see it.
You've had your hand in nearly every platform of broadcasting, whether it be radio, digital, or on TV. What do you think is the key to being able to tailor yourself to each platform and being good at that?
Yeah, I mean, this whole business, no matter what you're in, radio, digital, television, newspaper, magazine, at its very core is you're a storyteller. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And if you are able to perfect that side of this business, it projects everywhere. Can you tell a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end? I'm a big fan of having a surprise moment. No matter what platform you are, that's what kind of engages people. Can you craft those moments? And the best ones can do it on any medium. And so I think that at its core is why I've been able to kind of dabble in different mediums, because it's really the same thing. Just little tweaks. TV obviously is visual. Digital can be visual. You have to be a little bit more eloquent with your words on radio, and be very good with the English language on a written platform, whether it be newspaper or magazines. But at the end of the day, can you take a complex and a big story, digest it, refine it, and then project it in your own way and put your stamp on it? That's a storyteller.
I kind of want to move on now to sideline reporting, because you've had your hand in sideline reporting as well, for nationally televised NFL and college basketball games. How does one put their name out there, and put their work out there in front of the right people to get in those rotations and to get called up for those jobs? Because I found that a lot of times those come in the form of freelancing. Yeah.
Many sideline reporters are freelancers. There are a few that are employees of the network for which they work, but many of those are side jobs. They show up for a pre-production meeting, they do the game, and then they're gone, and they go back to whatever else they do, whether it's working for a local news, whether it's a content creator by themselves. Bonnie Bernstein was great at that. She had her own brand that she worked on, but then would dabble in other sideline reporting. Sideline reporting is a tough one to crack, and the reason is you're not going to get those reps. You can't manufacture those reps like we talk about, just going out with a DSLR camera and creating stories. You have to be in a broadcast. You have to get that first little foot in the door. But the way that I would go about it is, don't be afraid to get into the high school game. There's more high school broadcasts now than ever before. It may not be exactly what you're thinking your career path is, but that's how you get those. That's how you start refining, the way that you capture and retell those moments. There's all kinds of digital lower tier broadcasts within colleges, whether it be NAIA, Division III, Division II, Division I. We have soccer broadcasts. If you can get on a college campus and talk to those who put these broadcasts on, whether it be just for an in-house on-campus network, or if it's projected to maybe a little bit higher platform, an ESPN Plus or a stadium, you're going to have to get reps on the sideline, someone throwing down to you with a story. So that's the only way you can get in. Once you start getting those reps, then it's making phone calls and having lunch with executives. If Charlotte is a hotbed for college sports, reach out. Can I have coffee with you, Mr. or Miss Producer? They probably don't have any inventory that year because things are usually booked up for the season or for the year, but you get on their radar. Some of them won't have time for you, and that's okay. But many will. Many have come up through the ranks, and then you start showing them, this is what I've done at high school, the high school levels. This is what I've done at some college broadcasts. But you're not going to step into an ESPN broadcast or an NHL broadcast until you get those. The other way that you can get in that I've seen is working for a team as a content creator. Sometimes you get put into the in-stadium venue. I know many of girls and men who have come up through that ranks where they've done hits in stadium. Sometimes it's marketing. Sometimes it's reporting on what's going on in the stadium. But again, that's live. That's you're in the moment. You're telling a moment. And that's how you can start building the resume. That's the only way that you're going to get into that game, but it's done year in and year out. Just start getting into anything that you can at any level to start building that resume, and then reach out and start making phone calls.
Well, Taylor McGregor and I talked about that a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and she was like, doing digital is all good and well, but if you want to be a sideline reporter and do those things, you have to get the live reps, because you can retake, you can do takes, you can do multiple of them, when you're doing digital and you'd be like, oh, I don't like that, I'm going to re-record that. But when you're live and you got to ace it. And so, yeah, I think that's some really good advice for sure, especially with the high school broadcast, because you don't realize until you really sit there and look at it, how many opportunities there are. And you just have to put yourself out there and be like, hey, you need a content creator? Hey, you want a sideline reporter? I'm here. And be willing to do it at little to no cost or as well.
None, zero.
Yeah.
But at that point in your career, the experience is so much more valuable than the $50 that you might get, the $100 if you're lucky. But then you start refining when I train sideline reporters, and when we talk through what makes a good sideline reporter, you're able to start understanding what I call the 4 C's. And I think if you master these things, you're on your way to being a great sideline reporter. Are you clear, concise, correct, and conversational? You got to be clear, right? If you're not clear, no one understands what you're talking about. And you only have one shot when you're live. Someone can't go back and rewatch that. So you got to be clear. If not, your moment is blown. Concise, right? You may have 10 seconds, you may have 15 seconds, 20 when they throw down to you on the booth. You've got to learn how to take a big subject and compact that into a 10-second message. It's very hard to do. But the more reps you do, the more time that you have spending trying to be concise, the better off you are. Correct? You got to be correct. If you're not correct, there's no credibility, and it's ball game over. You have to be correct, or really there's nothing else. And then conversational. The best ones make the viewer comfortable. They don't like being talked down to. They like hearing from someone who would be their friend on a couch at a bar. So if you can knock out those 4 C's and get those reps, very hard to do. I mean, it's very hard. That's why there's only a select few that are really good at sideline reporting. But I think those 4 C's really put you on a path. If you can get those live reps, then you got a shot.
Adam Amin was on the podcast a couple weeks ago as well, and we talked all things play-by-play, and you do color commentary for Air Force football during the fall. So what's the transition like for you going from digital to TV and radio, and especially going from like being a host to then doing color?
Yeah, it's totally different, and something that I look forward to every football Saturday, because after I got out of local news and got out of sideline reporting, I was void of that live adrenaline. So 12 Saturdays a year, perhaps a bowl game or maybe a championship game added on to that, I get to feel that live excitement, and that, being clear, concise, correct, and conversational. I get to do that, which is big in my world for self-fulfillment, that I still get to do what I've kind of always thought I wanted to do. In a broadcast, in a football broadcast, my play-by-play guy, we have a relationship and a kind of a working order that he's narrow eyes and I'm wide eyes. And Jim Arthur, who I work with, is one of the best play-by-play guys in the country, in my opinion. And he's honed in on who has ball, who made tackle, how many yards, what down and distance, and then it's my chance to talk about something wide. But in the modern football world, you have these rapid offenses that are going. I've got 30 seconds worth of things I want to say, and all of a sudden I got to wrap up in 7 seconds. I sounded foolish when I first started this, not really knowing what I was doing. And once I started learning how to be a little bit more concise on radio, I kind of found my voice. But again, it's kind of the same thing. You're a storyteller. It's a 20-second story, a 5-second story, a 2-minute story for a pregame. Can you take this massive amount of information and deliver it in a clear, concise fashion? It's the same premise.
You've been now with the Mountain West Conference for nearly 10 years, and a lot has changed since you joined them in 2012. So how have you been able to adapt and continue to keep the Mountain West Network at the forefront of change and continuously being able to adapt?
Yeah, the older I get, the harder this becomes, because I'm less in touch with the new things that are coming up. When I started back in 2012, kind of the genesis of the Mountain West Network was the Mountain West was the first college conference that had a television network devoted 24/7 exclusively to the conference, its athletes, its coaches, et cetera, et cetera. In 2012, the plug was pulled for many reasons. And overnight, the Mountain West lost 24/7 program 365 days a week. You're never going to be able to match that or cut into that. But the commissioner, Craig Thompson, thought it was very important to stay somewhat in the video space. So he approached me in the summer of 2012, asked me if I would ever be interested in leaving local news and sideline reporting and coming over and heading up the Mountain West Network. We bought a camera, we bought a tripod and a microphone and a laptop to edit, and that was it. And so I spent time doing what I've always done, just telling stories as best I could. A year later, we transitioned into some live games. We thought, we should probably start having, the women's soccer, the men's basketball games that aren't on TV, the softball games, the baseball games. These need to be broadcast as much as possible. So we expanded our team. We brought in a former colleague of mine named Brian Tripp. He was the news director at the Mountain. He came in. He oversees the live. So we started broadcasting, 1,000 events a year. But then comes along, more social media. How do we get involved in this? So we start creating shorter video clips that go out social. And then a pandemic comes and say, oh, geez, we're shut down. Our studio, which I'm in right now that we built in year 2, what are we going to do now? Well, we use, video conferencing to tell stories. We built a studio in my basement. So there's been a constant adaptation, but I'll tell you, this business is moving faster than it ever has before. And I find myself many times, kind of looking behind and saying, what's coming up next? But you do your best to stay on top of things. You surround yourself with young people like yourself to keep yourself honest in what the latest and greatest is. But again, whether you're telling stories from your basement or in the studio, or you're out in San Diego telling the story of 2 grandmas that go to a basketball game, people just like hearing stories and hearing people's triumphs and tribulations and what makes them who they are. So it's still the same premise, but I'll tell you, this world is moving very, very fast, and as I get older, it's incredibly hard to keep up with.
So do we have any chance of seeing you on TikTok anytime soon?
I barely know what TikTok is. Let me say this. If I showed up on TikTok, my 13-year-old boy would be horrified. He would be horrified. So maybe I should. For that reason and that reason
I think
only.
just embarrass comments.
I can do this.
Well, let's talk about the hiring process, because I want to know, from your perspective, what is your advice to young broadcasters when it comes to standing out amongst people and other candidates and really putting their best foot forward? Because there's a lot of ways that you can mess up, and a lot of little things that can take you out of that, of being a good candidate.
Sure. One, when I'm looking at, at resume tapes, and there are resume reels, I guess we don't do tapes anymore. There, I'm showing my age again. When I look at those videos that are sent in, it's not uncommon that we'll get 300 for one position, and you have to find a way to really hone that down into who really is the candidate that best fits. My opinion is not what would be best for another network, but one, as we've talked about, storytelling, that's number one. If you're not a good storyteller, if you can't craft a message with your words or your body language and the way that you deliver, it's end of story. So that at its very core is what you do. If you're not good at that, then you're out of the candidate pool. One thing, a red flag for me, is an email or a cover letter that says, "I love sports." Please don't get into this business because you love sports. Now, that has to be, we all love sports in this business. If you don't love sports, you couldn't do this. But
that can't be the sole reason why you're applying for a job.
No, and the reason that's a red flag for me is I've come across many people in 25 years that want to be at the stadium. They want to be there. If you want to be there and that's the only reason you get into this business, you'll get burnout, you'll get run out, you'll hate it because you're not with your friends in the stands. You can't go party with your friends and celebrate the big win. You got to go into some tough environments, some locker rooms where it's not fun to be. And all of a sudden what was fun isn't so fun and you got a job to do. So hey, Mr. Kurtz, I really want to get into sports because I love sports broadcasting because I really love sports. That right there, I'm going to keep reading, but there's a big red flag. So understand that this is a grind. It's a job. And you got to be very careful about mixing business with pleasure. I've found myself many a times where, going to a game is my job. And that's tough because you don't want to do your job. You want to be at the game. So that I always warn people, be careful when you mix business with pleasure. I've done it. I love it. And it's fine. But I've seen it burn out a lot of people. And then, when your storytelling is kind of at the very core of your tape, you're not looking for that viral moment. I see all too often on some of our resume reels that get sent in, the reporter is the story. And in the world of viral video right now, that can elevate a career big time. I understand that. But I have a pet peeve when, the moment that's created in some way, shape, or form by the reporter becomes the story. The story should become the story. It always should be. Content is king. That should be the moment. Your job is to see the moment, tell the moment, and let the moment be the moment, not be the story. So as long as the person is willing to grind, willing to learn, take constructive feedback, didn't say positive feedback. There's much more constructive and sometimes a little bit negative feedback. I like to say constructive, but don't always hope that you're going to hear what you want to hear. That doesn't get you better. But if you're willing to do that, you're willing to try to build stories in the right impactful way, and you're willing to let the moment be the moment, and you're not the star, I think you can be on a great path. And those are pretty much the people that we go out and hire when we are hiring here. And I have for 20 years in television.
Let's take a moment to talk about Sage, our sponsor for Season 2 of The Rise. For many of us who are on air, finding pieces that are both stylish and affordable are sometimes hard to come by. This season, The Rise is sponsored by Sage, an online boutique that is dedicated to helping women find looks that help you accomplish your life goals while feeling confident and looking great. Use the code THERISE20 for 20% off your next purchase at shopsage.com, and make sure to follow @ShopSage on Instagram for updates on new arrivals and more. Well, reels are a topic that people always talk about, especially in this industry. What advice to young broadcasters do you have when it comes to creating a successful reel? You touched on a couple things, but like when you're putting together your reel, what are some things that you want to see as an employer that you'll be like, okay, she can handle this, she can handle that, he did really well at this,
Sure.
That kind of thing?
One, I want to see how you handle live. When I say live, I'd like to see some chaos. Whether that's, on a basketball floor, and chaos doesn't mean people going crazy behind you. It can be an intense moment in a basketball game, a football game, a soccer game. How do you handle yourself under pressure? Because anytime you're in a live environment, you expect the unexpected. I did a live shot in Cincinnati at Tim Tebow's first game, and I had people literally about 6 feet in front of me. I'm looking this way, and I'm looking directly at them, and they're going nuts, throwing things, not necessarily at me, but they were drunk, they're going crazy, and I can't let that affect myself. How do you handle yourself in live? Can you be clear with your words? Can you be concise? So I want to see that right off the top. What do you look like? What do you sound like? How do you handle yourself in pressure? A montage of that would be great. 2, I want to know how you ask questions. That's what we do. That's when you're a storyteller, you're a reporter, you ask questions. And can you ask questions in a inquisitive way, a respectful way, and in a way that's going to get good answers? It's become kind of the buzz phrase in our business is, talk about it. That's a lazy way to do it. I've done it. I'm certainly not saying I've never done that, but when someone just says, hey, talk about your shot, that's not inquisitive.
Anyone can do that. That
right.
doesn't separate you from anyone else.
Right. You saw the moment with your 2 eyes. What intrigues you about that? How can you craft your questions where you might get a thoughtful answer? That's a very hard thing to do in this business, is be a good question asker. And there are times that I find myself like, that was dumb. But you learn from it. So how do you present yourself in chaos? 2, some Q&As, whether it be a live shot, something in studio. And then I really want to see what you're able to create story-wise, whether that's, a podcast with a Q&A, whether that's a what we call in TV news, a package that you've gone and shot, sat down, you wrote it, you edit it. Can you build something with audio visual symmetry where it is something that is presentable and makes an impact? So what do you look like? What do you sound like? And how do you handle yourself in chaos? That can be handled with some live shots. So how do you ask questions? Are you thoughtful in what you are asking? And 3, what sort of storyteller are you? Those 3 things in that order is the way that I like to look at things, because one is going to lead to the other. If I'm not a big fan of the way that you're presenting yourself, we'll take you out. If I'm not a big fan, you get to the Q&A, struggle there. And then we'll get to the storytelling. And the storytelling is the icing on the top. And then you go to this pile or this pile.
We've had many conversations about this, but questions, you talked about it just there. But I mean, when you're in that moment, and unless you are really taking in that moment and being present, sometimes you fall back on those questions that just come naturally to you. So How do you come up with questions? How do you kind of create I know I have notes on my phone of when I hear a good sideline reporter ask a good question, I write it down. And it's just, I kind of have collected this like gallery of questions to formulate my own questions off of. But what's the key for you in creating those questions and coming up with those?
I try to find something a little bit more granular in the moment. So a big shot, a game-winning shot. It's easy to say you hit the game-winning shot. How's that feel? Everyone knows how it feels. But how was it drawn up? Did you get the shot that you wanted? Why was it, the top of the key that you shot it from? Have you ever hit a shot like that? How many times in your backyard have you practiced that moment? You're going to get something else, but it looks a little bit more inquisitive than just like your thoughts, how you feel. Now, again, that's a critical thing to say, and I've done it, and then I've had to be critical of myself. But look for something a little bit more granular and be inquisitive. That's what a reporter does. They formulate questions because they're curious. They're curious on behalf of what they want to know and maybe what the viewers want to know. So look for something specific in the moment that then that person knows that you watched what they did. That you were, you weren't just kind of lazy and just like, how quickly can we do this? And I could be on camera and smile, right? Big pet peeve. Did you actually watch this and digest this and know what happened? And if you don't, it's okay. That's why you ask. That's the whole purpose of why you're there. Right. So be specific in what and I'll tell you, there are many times, and I've been in this position, that a coach, if he's ornery or an athlete, knows that you don't know what you're talking about, knows that you're being lazy, and then starts playing with you. So if you know what you're talking about, and we can get into this, but my favorite buzzword is know your content. If you know your content and can back up why you asked that question, well, here's what I saw. They give you much better answers and they respect you for it.
Well, and I mean, I've even experienced that myself. Like, when I was starting out, I would ask those questions like, what are your thoughts on this first half? Like, and granted, those sometimes do give you good answers because it just allows the coach kind of free reins to talk about whatever they want. But it's hard to, come up with those questions. But once you, like you said, know your content, the coaches and players have a lot more respect for you and are maybe going to be more willing to give you those better answers, because it goes back to what this whole industry is about and what Taylor McGregor even talked about a couple weeks ago. It's trust and creating that trust between you and that player or you and that coach.
When you know your content, you do build that trust because you can't fake this business over the long haul. I've seen some get away with it early in their career, and then it catches up with them. Those who, just want to live the glamorous side. It's not as glamorous as people think, but think that this is a glamour business, and I hold a microphone and I smile and I look good on camera, and all my friends want to pat me on the back and say what an unbelievable job I did. Those people flame out. If you know your content, if you're inquisitive and you're able to, gather, digest, and report that information in a number of different ways, then you're in a solid spot. And I always tell, young reporters, whether it be in local news that are working live shots or sideline reporters, the worst thing that you can do is script things out. It's the absolute worst. I've done it. I did it for years. And the moment that I cleansed myself of that habit and that fear of not being able to do it on my own and just trust what I saw, I feel like my career took off. There's an exercise that I'll put young sideline reporters through is we'll have a hit in a game that we're going to say 5 different ways. And if you know what you're talking about, you lived it, you saw it, you should present it in 5 different ways. If I ask you, Bridget, how was your day today? And you tell me 5 different times, you're not going to tell me exactly word for word everything, but you lived it. You know your content, you know your day, and it will be clear, concise, correct, conversational because you knew it. Now, if you're going to talk about the quarterback who was the top draft pick and he played high school for this unbelievable program and his coach made this impact, if you're going to fake it and you're going to hopefully remember what you write, you're going to fail. I guarantee you're going to fail. You're going to fumble. You're going to worry about what you didn't say, what you scripted, rather than I've lived this. I know it. I know this like the back of my hand, like I know my day today, and you'll spit it out in a clear, concise, correct, and conversational way. Never script. We've all done it, and every reporter will start doing it. The moment that you can cleanse yourself of that, you take off.
I will never forget being at the Mountain West tournament last year, and I was stressing, and you simply said, know your content. And once you said that to me, that has just always stuck in my head ever since, because it's like, if you know what you're talking about, you shouldn't have an issue asking those questions. And I was a culprit of it as well. Like, I scripted out everything. And I just remember, like, the second I would lose my place during a sideline hit, my brain would go to a jumbly mess. I would start freaking out because I was like, okay, where am I in the script? And that's the easiest way to put the worst foot forward for yourself in this industry, is by scripting things out. So know your content.
That doesn't mean you can't have notes.
Right.
Key player Bridget Howard scored 20 points in the first half, career high. Like 20 points, career high. Bridget Howard. You can say that 5 different ways. You need to have the facts right so you can be correct. And if you need those cliff notes, great. But we don't need to script out what a performance by Bridget Howard, who had a career high 20. It was a career high. You should know that. Tell us that. You can tell us 5 different ways, and each one is correct. And you can be concise and conversational.
This past year has really shaken up this industry. So, to young broadcasters, what do you have to say to them, as they look forward and taking their journey to the next level in this industry?
Be patient. That's hard to do, and it's a competitive business, and everyone wants to get their foot in the door. I get it. I was there once, but the jobs are now starting to open up. They were shut down. They were limited. There were longtime veterans in this business, dear friends of mine, that lost their job because there wasn't inventory. So the trickle-down effect is big. You got these veteran broadcasters that are hungry to take any opportunity. Well, then that affects the younger folks, right? Because, like, I could have this person who's hungry and ready to take anything and has 20 years experience, or the young broadcaster. Chances are, all things being equal, of course they're going to take, and give those opportunities. But things are going to open up. In our league, we saw more and more broadcasts being opened up, and there'll be more opportunities. So, one, be patient, but be diligent in because things are going to hit fast and furious here this summer with things being opened up. And if there is as much as we all hope and what it sounds like, we should be a full go come fall. Fingers crossed. Be diligent. Keep your eyes out there. Don't be afraid to be a content creator on a college campus, for a minor league team, a major league team, if you're so lucky. Because at the end of the day, all those reps, they're the same. No matter if it's at the highest level of the professional ranks or a college or minor league, you're working on you and your role and your rise. And 2, don't be afraid to take something that's a little out of your comfort zone. And just some personal experience. I grew up in the local news ranks. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I thought I'd ever do. And I wasn't looking for an out from local news. I would have been happy doing my job in Colorado Springs and Denver for the rest of my life. This job opened up, knew nothing about digital. It worked better with my family. So jumped into it, was happy. But there were 2 jobs that, in my career that I wasn't going to take. In fact, there were a time where going to sleep on it, and I thought, I don't think this is my jam. One, sideline reporting. I was afraid of how I might look. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of going on, a national television broadcast and saying something stupid, looking stupid, and all my friends be like, look at this idiot. There were times where in my mind, I didn't perform as well as I thought I could. But man, am I glad that I did it. Great memories, great experience. It helped me be the broadcaster and executive producer that I am today. So don't be afraid of failure, right? And then the other one was the Air Force radio gig. When it was presented to me, as they thought that I was the guy. I'd never done radio. I didn't know anything about that job. And in fact, I learned it on the fly. The first 2 years, I didn't think I was that good. I've kind of settled into the role. I like what I'm doing. I'm happy with my performance, but I can't help but think back and think, what if I wouldn't have taken that? Because I was a little afraid of not doing a good job. As long as you trust what you're doing and the approach that you take, knowing your content and the 4 C's, I think you can take any role at any level and really be very good. So don't be afraid to fail. Everyone fails in this business. Everyone looks stupid. It's harder now with social media, right? I don't know how young broadcasters do it. We see all the time that the negativity that's on social media. I'm personally glad I didn't come up in this because it might have fried me out. So kudos to you all that read that. But maybe don't read it. I tell folks that work for me, don't ever read the comments about you. It used to be in the bottom of a story, right, on a website, but now it's real time on social media. Don't read it because you're not as good as you think and you're not as bad as you think. Ever. It's never as bad as you think. And I know you've experienced that yourself. You always think in the moment, this is terrible. My life is over. I'm never going to get a job. And you go back and look at it and be like, geez, that wasn't that bad. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, but, never think that you're as good as you think or as bad as you think, because it's always somewhere in the middle.
Well, and sometimes, like you said, the biggest question marks can reap the biggest rewards. And so I think that is such a good piece of advice. But also, everyone needs to get their reels, their resumes ready, because once those jobs open up, you got to be prepared. So that is some really good advice. And yeah, definitely for everyone listening, keep your eyes out this summer because, like you said, the jobs will be popping up like no other.
Yeah, and they will for a long time, because the more this digital revolution, takes over the sports world and continues to dominate it, the more opportunities there will be for young aspiring broadcasters. There was a time, 10 years ago that if it wasn't on a network TV, there was no place for it. You had to have appointment viewing. This is the time that it's going to be on TV. Now you can kick, you can tip off, you can have first pitch at any time you want, on any network you want, because you can create your own network, and you can have anyone you want on your broadcast. So these things will continue to evolve. There'll be more opportunities every day than ever before, and someone's going to take my job, and I'm going to regret saying all this. No, but there'll be all kinds of opportunities, and young broadcasters, there's never been a more exciting time to jump in the field in this digital revolution of college and professional sports.
All right. Well, now we've got our quick hit segment, which is a couple questions for you to get you out of broadcasting, get to know a little bit more about the real Jesse Kurtz. So are you ready for this?
I'm done with the fake Jesse Kurtz.
First question. What is your go-to vacation spot?
Oh, Maui, Hawaii, without a doubt. Maui, Hawaii is unbelievable. It's relaxing. It's adventurous. It's romantic. It's the best place on earth.
I really thought I had your answer down to that. I thought you were going to say Beaver Creek. So.
Oh, that's 1B.
Yeah.
as a Colorado native, like Vail, Beaver Creek is like a second home. But you're right. If I was going to just pick up and just go somewhere for the weekend, Beaver Creek, Colorado would be right there. But if I'm taking a vacation, we're hitting the island.
That's your in-state vacation. You're out of state. That's how I should have phrased that question.
There you go.
Second question. What is the most memorable interview that you have ever done?
A kid named Nikolai Lorette, a little bit off the radar. Nikolai Lorette was a double amputee high school football player that was from Russia. He was adopted here in the States. His story about being adopted, wanting to play football, didn't have legs, find a way to make it happen, gets on the field, without a doubt, the most memorable. Maybe the one that I was most awestruck by was Joe Sakic at his retirement. When Joe Sakic, Hall of Fame hockey player for the Avalanche, led them to a couple of Stanley Cups. When he retired, to sit across from Joe Sakic, like I had a hard time spitting out words, because he is like, on the Mount Rushmore of Colorado sports, and, to get a chance to pick his brain about the remarkable career that he had, that was super, super memorable and special for me.
Question number 3. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Anything Backstreet Boys. My wife is terrified that if a Backstreet Boys comes on at karaoke, and if I've had a few too many pops, what might happen. there are legends in Fort Collins, Colorado that speak of Backstreet Boys on karaoke. If the walls could talk, they would tell stories that I probably don't want out there. But Backstreet Boys, there you go.
All right. Mic drop on that one. Question number 4. What is something on your bucket list?
On my bucket list, to go to Europe. Never traveled really abroad. I've been to a few islands, Jamaica and Mexico, but really haven't experienced, old world culture. So going to Paris, Rome, Athens, that's something that my wife and I are angling to get to when life slows down. That I think will be right on the top of the list of something that we'll do.
That's on my bucket list as well. I want to go to Pompeii really bad. I've always been fascinated with that. So, hopefully sometime soon that'll happen.
Of history. A lot of history over there.
Last question for you. What is your favorite sports movie?
Major League. That's the great.
I knew that one.
Yeah.
I knew that.
I think it won more Academy Awards than any movie in the history of Hollywood. Charlie Sheen and company. That's the best movie of all time. Sports movie or not, best movie of all time. Still
need to see it. So.
What? We're done. Bye.
That's it. That's the end of the episode. Well, it actually is. But Jess, thank you so much for coming on The Rise today. It has been so good to talk to you and see you virtually. But I think this advice that you gave today will be so great and so helpful for young broadcasters. So I really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate it. And again, you're doing a remarkable job with this, being your own content creator. Super proud of you that you've been able to find a way to make yourself relevant. But again, like what you're doing for young broadcasters, I don't think you'll quite understand the impact that you are making or have made for years to come when someone says, hey, I learned that from so-and-so on The Rise. So the collection of talent that you have been able to cultivate here on this podcast and deliver has been really exciting for me to see, and deserves congratulations. So great job, kid.
Little